When I was a kid, there was a story about a Toys R Us where stuff was coming off the shelves and big wheels were just driving down the aisles by themselves. Supposedly, the store was haunted and it freaked me out. Was that an irrational fear? We learn more about ghosts. All right, and welcome to Learning More. So this week, we're talking about ghosts. Okay, I know it's one of those topics that some people believe, some people don't. Some people are kind of like, is this a real thing? Like, how do we explain these odd things that are happening? I remember as a kid, there was a Toys R Us in, I think it was Hayward, California, where they would show this video on the news of like stuff like rolling in the aisles, like a big wheel rolling down the aisles, or stuff falling off the shelf. They had all these security cameras set up in there and they would see this stuff just happen. And I remember as a kid not wanting to go to Toys R Us anymore because I was afraid that there would be ghosts there. So what is the explanation behind this? I don't know. I mean, something's going on. People are, hearing noises or seeing shadows or seeing, or even in some cases, communicating perhaps with something. So that's why I wanted to learn more today about ghosts. And I decided to go to the co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Foundation. He's also a paranormal investigator, an author, a podcaster, a YouTuber. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me on, Russ. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's something that I've always been interested in, and something that is always like, it's like one of those things of like, should I even have this interview? Are my lights going to start blinking as we talk, or what's going to happen, right? So tell us a little kind of about your background and what gave you your interest in paranormal investigation.
Well, like most people who actually engage in this hobby, I guess is the best way to sum it up. I had stuff happen to me when I was younger that couldn't easily be explained. And it kind of starts an interest. It started just an interest in what else is going on in the world around you. I'd watch programs like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, In Search Of back in the day, for those of us that grew up in the 70s, 80s. I liked all unsolved mysteries, and I was always fascinated by the ones where they would get into something that had to do with Bigfoot, Ogopogo, Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, hauntings. I just always found that subject really, really interesting to me. And always wanted to know more about it because like you just said there's something to it. People have been experiencing unknown things since human history began. It's written about even, in ancient texts, in the Bible, people are seeing, they called it chariots of the gods during the Egyptian era. Like, it's just weird stuff that couldn't be explained. And I kind of always just wanted to know, well, what is that? And why did I have these experiences? And what does it mean? And did others have them? And when you start to other people, almost everybody has some kind of story that could fall into the paranormal realm. And so I just I want to know more. And I kind of just sort of dedicated parts of my life to it. And then as I got older, I finally got to the point, no, I need to take a serious look at what this is, and joined up with a team and met other like-minded people. And it just kind of went from there, basically.
Gotcha.
So it all started as a kid.
So let's first, we got to hear the stories as a kid. Like what were those incidences that happened?
There was two, actually. One of them when I was, 5 or 6, me and my mom went to pick up a friend of mine who was coming over for a sleepover, and she had left the vehicle to go get him. And I was sitting in the back seat looking out. There's a hatchback, an old Gremlin car, which was ugly, but anyways, it had a hatchback. And I remember looking out at this back, and you could see the whole street, and there's no one on the street. And then suddenly this face appeared just on the other side of the glass. Like, it was there 1 second and then it was gone. And it looked, I've always described it as mongoloidish. It didn't look human. And it freaked me out enough that I hit the floor of the vehicle and I didn't want to look out. Like, I was scared. And then I heard footsteps come up, and it was my buddy. And, and I'd asked him, well, did you see anybody, or were you around the back of the vehicle? He's like, no, I just got here and I didn't see anyone around. I can't really explain it. My mom came up, and she was a teacher, so she dismissed it as an overactive childhood imagination. But I remember it. I can still remember it. 5 or 6. So I was like 43 years ago, what it looked like. And it really just sort of set off something. It unnerved me enough that I didn't forget about it. Flash forward a number of years, I was a teenager here in the interior of British Columbia. We were in Sasquatch territory. And I grew up, my parents had a place on a lake. It was a cabin on a lake. And I'd spend most of my summers and weekends out there during the seasons that you could go. And I'd always bring a friend of mine along for weekends or trips, a week at a time. And we were free range children. My parents were like, be home for lunch, dinner, bedtime. Otherwise, go play in the woods or do whatever you want or swim. And we'd always hike, take the same trail from the cabin up into the woods and play for hours. And one night we'd come down for dinner, ate, decided we wanted to go back out. We went back out, same path. And we got to this tree that we had passed not an hour earlier. And usually these were all pine trees. So the ground would always be littered with pine needles. And it was an hour or so ago. But on this trip, we went up, the pine needles were cleared. There was a little fire pit, like small. There was a little lean-to dug into the ground. And there was a bone in it. The picked clean bone, which looked like it could have been part of an arm or something, or a leg or some animal leg or something like that. But it was all small, like not human size, but it was small. And it was one of those, that's just really weird. And we were hanging out and it was getting dark and we just got this uneasy feeling from all of it. Cause how did that happen in like the span of an hour? So we're like, let's just go back to the cabin. And we went back to the cabin, but we couldn't stop talking about it all night. Like, what was that? And why did that show up? And what was that? So let's first light, we got up, we got dressed, we went right back to that spot. No sign of anything. In fact, the ground was completely littered with pine needles again, as if nothing had been disturbed at all.
Wow. And that's not just you. That's another person seeing that as well.
Another person with me. So I didn't imagine the first one could be chalked up to being a kid and an imagination.
Yeah.
But there was two of us.
How do you explain that one?
Buddies, and we still talk about it to this day. What was that? You know what I mean? And then
right.
Sasquatch, who knows? I don't know. But just sparked, those two sparked definitely an interest in wanting to know what's going on. And what's happening.
That's the thing. It's like you could go back in history. They would say something that we know today that is completely normal was like paranormal. Yep. Like there's things in the world that we don't understand. And that I think is where my interest in this is like, will at some point we start to understand these things? And will we start to see that, will the paranormal, will that become normal and just known at some point? I think that's where, where my interest lies in this. Okay. So now we know why you got into this. Now we need to know how. How do you do this? How do you do investigations on the paranormal?
Well, it's funny. We call it a pseudoscience because basically what we do is as a team of investigators, we either seek out a location that's got a reputation for being haunted, or we are actually sometimes even invited by people into their homes who are having stuff they can't explain, or a business or a historical site that's had a number of reportings. They want answers too. So we go in and we interview everybody involved and we try to determine if there's something legitimately paranormal happening or if it could be explained naturally. Because 99% of the time it can be explained naturally. I mean, Peter, who's my co-founder, he has a background in, construction and engineering. So he knows, what in a house will make noises that you can think are bangings on walls. Louise, who's another co-founder, she works in mental health. So she knows if someone, maybe it's a person thinking something is going on or it's an addiction issue. I have a journalism background, so I'm good at research and asking questions, etc. And so we just go through this process of determining, first if there's a natural explanation. And then if we think there could be something there, we go in as a group and we primarily use video and still cameras and audio equipment, motion detectors, and all this kind of stuff. We try to keep it simple. If you watch shows like the ghost hunting TV shows, they break out all this gear and they've got this SLS camera that can apparently show you these stick men of things that aren't there. You know what I mean? But it's all untested, untried stuff. The SLS camera actually was created for Nintendo. So it's a video game device that it's just, you can't take it. You have to take it with a grain of salt. So we stick to the basics, our 5 senses, audio recorders, digital cameras, sometimes even thermal imagery, just so you can see different changes in temperature, that kind of thing. And we go in and we investigate. And a lot of the investigations involve sitting in a room, talking to nothing, in hopes that you're going to pick something up while you roll cameras and audio. And that's really what goes into it, other than the research component and the interview component. And then you take all this footage and this audio data back and you sit and you scrutinize it for hours and hoping to pick up some murmur, some image you didn't see or what have you, and then present that as the closest thing to evidence. And I have a colleague who is in security and he hates the term evidence because none of it's going to hold up in a court of law.
Right.
because it is just what it is, right? Like
Right.
it can
Right.
be refuted to the best of the ability, and that's really how it works. So it is a pseudoscience. It's something we would love for science to take more seriously, but because none of it can be reproduced hundreds of times in a lab and tested over and over again,
Right.
we
It's
just
hard
don't
to,
at this point,
yeah.
right? Which is the unfortunate part, and that's what makes it so frustrating as someone who investigates it, is it's hard for it to be taken too seriously because of that, and because of all the shows out there, as you mentioned in your introduction, to
Right.
play it up, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, okay, so they go in and, they'll, whatever, they have a season of 20 episodes of some ghost hunting show. I won't call any of them out specifically, but let's say they have 20 episodes. In 19 of those episodes, they've found some sort of ghost. They've got some sort of evidence. They've got some sort of something talking to them, things falling off shelves, whatever it is. So it seems like they've got a fairly, like a 90% success rate, 95% success rate at finding a ghost in a particular place. What is, in your investigations, what's your success rate of actually finding something out?
Well, I think I could put it closer to 50-50 or 60-40.
Okay.
But again, like maybe even less than that. Like we've gone into places and got absolutely nothing, like nothing at
Okay.
all has happened, despite the claims to the contrary of the people who live there. Couldn't even pick up a weird vibe. You know what I mean? Like nothing. And then there's other places that we've been back to many times where we have got EVPs, which are the electronic voice phenomena I mentioned that you record. You ask a question, you get an intelligent response. So you're not just asking yes or no questions. You want, like, can you give us your name? Or can you name someone who's here a part of this group? Or, how many people are in this room right now? And then if you get something like, say, if there's 5 of us in the room and you get like a 5 or even a 6, which could count for whoever it is that you're
Oh,
speaking,
right.
whoever quote unquote
Right.
it is that you're speaking with, that counts as closer to evidence than not. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And yeah, I mean, we've got like, pictures of like partial people, transparent people in a room.
Oh,
In a
really?
hotel. That counts for something. I've been to places. There's a team of us in this hotel. There's 5 or 6 of us in the dining room after hours, and we're asking these questions. And we actually, something said, and we actually didn't just hear it on the mics. We all heard it physically say, "Get out," a voice that we couldn't, there's nobody there. No one in the
Oh,
group
really?
did it. But we got the proverbial "get out" that Eddie Murphy used to make fun of in his comedy routines when he talked about
Right.
horror movies, right? And then that makes that you react to that. And I've seen motion sensors start moving on their own, like someone walking back and forth in front of it, but you don't see anybody. And I mean, you try to counter, okay, there's a highway out there. Is it maybe a vibration in the floor? But it didn't happen every time a vehicle went by. You know what I mean? But what happened
Right.
when we started asking questions, something started setting this off. And that's kind of the closest we get to things. So I've seen some stuff that makes me compelled to think there could be something going on, but I'm not ready to jump in and go, yeah, man, ghosts are real. You know what I mean? Like
Maybe the ghost is the easy way out. Maybe it's something even, bigger and crazier out there. But I don't know if these shows and the way that they're treating it is helping this to become more researched by scientists. I think this is probably making it a little bit more, in a way, ridiculed and perhaps even creating more skepticism.
definitely. I agree with you 100%. It doesn't help at all. Which is why when we sort of we've documented our stuff and done it as a web series. We show it as it is. And some people might find it boring, but I know people who have watched it, who are in the field, really find it very interesting because we are not jazzing anything up. We're not staging scares or musical stingers to try to make you like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we want to show what we've seen and experienced on an investigation and leave it up to people to decide.
Yeah. Now I've watched a video. It seems like you guys have a little fun too. So
We have a
that's
good
always
time
good.
doing it.
Yeah.
Have to, because I mean, you got to think you're in an old house or whatever, or the woods, because we went looking for Bigfoot once, and it's dark, and you're talking to nothing, and you kind of at some point you kind of go, this is a little bit nuts what we're doing here. So you got to have fun with it at the same time, right?
All right. Well, you know what? Let's take a short break here. We'll continue our conversation. I'm comfortable with continuing the conversation because my lights haven't gone off. I haven't seen anything yet. So we'll continue talking about ghosts until I do. So we'll continue the conversation and we'll learn more about ghosts right after this. All right, and welcome back. Thank you for listening and subscribing to Learning More. I'm Russ, and oh man, we're talking about ghosts today. I've got Jason with me. He's the co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Foundation, a paranormal investigator, an author, a podcaster, a YouTuber, and today a guest on Learning More. Jason, have you walked into a location that has just scared you? Have you been like too afraid to walk into any locations when you're doing these investigations?
No,
No?
never. It's surprisingly unscary to do this kind of thing, right? I've only had two things happen that have kind of unnerved me ever
Yeah.
doing this sort of stuff. And one wasn't even an investigation. My wife and I were out looking for houses 13 years ago, and we went into this one. And she's basically the Scully to my Mulder. She doesn't believe in any of this stuff. Like, she's a hardcore science nerd, basically.
Okay.
We went in with the realtor, and the outside was great. And we went in upstairs, and it was nice, but something felt a little off. And then we went downstairs, and it was such an oppressive feeling in the basement, and it was unnaturally dark. And for whatever reason, the people who lived there had had crosses up on every freaking wall and these rosaries everywhere. And it spooked me. And my wife she's like, I don't like the feeling of this place. We got to leave. And so we all left and went outside and felt
Oh,
completely
wow.
fine again.
Oh, that's weird.
That was unnerving.
Yeah.
That was
That unnerving feeling. That's the thing that gets me too. Like I just got kind of chills when you were telling me that story there.
Oh yeah. And I did too. And it was 13 years ago, but it felt bad. And
Right.
a few times where I've been anywhere that's felt bad to me, and I was a crime reporter for years. So I go to places where people were murdered, to write the stories up. And you get kind of that feeling too in those places that something bad happened there. And that's how that basement felt in that house, but times 1,000.
Wow.
So
now, have you done any research on that house to see if there was anything?
I wish I did. I wish I'd gone. I don't even remember what the address was anymore. You know what I mean?
Oh, right.
One of those we went to 4 more houses and then kind of didn't think about it for a while. And I wish I'd gone back. But it felt, and then throw in the religious symbols, and you just have the makings of something that just felt wrong at that time. It just did.
Yeah. We in looking for houses, we had a house we called the murder house. So we didn't feel right about it either. We kind of got that same sort of, this is not right for us. Like within a minute of being in there, we just both felt weird about the house. Okay, so you guys have done you've got a series that actually won Best Documentary. Can you tell us a little about that?
Web series, and that's called We Want to Believe, and it's basically it is our version of a paranormal reality series that Peter and I cooked up because he'd been approached many times, like by Netflix and other travel channel, to do shows, but he knows what happens because he was a part of TAPS, which is the group, Ghost Hunters, which was the first real show. He was a part of that, so he has that insight into what goes on these shows once the pressure hits, to produce something, and he never wanted to get involved in that. So we decided to do it, like I mentioned earlier, to show what actually happens on an investigation, the process that goes into it, the fun that can be had, but the seriousness of it and how quite undramatic it can be. And so we've been doing it for about a year and a bit now. And at Midwest Weird Fest, one of our investigations, The Barn, screened, and it did win Best Documentary Web Series there. So we're very proud of it. We've done, a place that was like an allegedly haunted barn. We've done a place called the Doll House, which is Bailey House here in the interior, and it's a heritage home. And it's called the Doll House because it's got those like early 1900s dolls that are porcelain and it looks like the eyes are always watching you. And we've had voices in there that went off, and things coming off shelves and stuff like that. And then we did a Bigfoot investigation, and we've got a bunch more that we're doing now that we can get back out and start filming again. So we really enjoy it. It's been super well received by those in the paranormal field who appreciate the seriousness of it. And we have some fun, and we put a lot of work into it, and we're glad that people like it and enjoy it. So.
Nice. Well, and that was the concern. I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to interview somebody about ghosts for my podcast. And she's like, oh, just don't make it goofy. Don't make it, where you've got the scary music and you've got,
I know.
And that's why, like in reading through what you guys have done, that's what I like. It does. And on one of your websites, it says that you're serious-minded investigators who conduct investigations and not ghost hunters. I think that is great. Yes. And I like the way that you guys are approaching this stuff. So definitely do check out the web series. We'll put a link to that in the podcast description. But I'll just ask you there, do you believe in ghosts?
Like the show says, like I want to believe in it. Like I said, I've had stuff happen. I am convinced that something happens when we die. Like there's more to it than just like lights out and you
Hmm.
stop, right? The question that I'm looking for is, well, what exactly is that happened? Does, your spirit stay behind? Does your energy go into the Earth's electromagnetic field? And that's what we're picking up on, right? Or there's the
Hmm.
very popular theory now of the multiverse theory, that you just go
Oh,
into
right.
somewhere else. That's being and even science is starting to look into that possibility now, parallel universes, different timelines, string theory, all that. Um, so I look at it that way. I know something happens, whether it's like, ghosts. The whole idea of ghosts is that it's a dead person. And I don't know exactly if that's exactly what it is, but I think we definitely, our energy goes somewhere, or we go somewhere else after we die. And I think that's what people interact with in some capacity when these things happen, or it's different. Yeah, that's the closest I could come to your answer on
Right.
that one,
Right. Yeah, well, and I mean, that's obviously, if you were able to figure that out, you wouldn't be here to talk to me, because
I've done a huge
you would
book
have
for it.
had to have
Like
gone
a
through
movie
it.
be made, all this stuff. If I had an answer to that,
Yeah,
like.
exactly, right. So, okay, you mentioned the electronic voice phenomena, or the EVP.
Yep.
Is that just audio gear that you guys have?
Basically, yeah, like it's basically our digital recorders with headphones. And then we will break out something called a spirit box. And basically all that is an AM FM receiver that cycles
Okay,
through various AM FM channels at the same time. And that's supposed to make it easier to communicate with ghosts. And you got to take a lot of that with a grain of salt too, because you are picking up on various radio frequencies.
hmm,
Where we kind of get a little more serious about it is, like I mentioned, the asking of questions and looking for an intelligent response. So not a yes, no. And if it creates a lot of static. And if that static stops and you get an intelligence response, we take that as a bit more of a serious answer, especially if it's related to something in the room or a question that's
gotcha.
been asked. And we've got some, more or less compelling stuff out of that. Like we have had Peter asked, what is my name? Do you know what my name is? And the static was going there, then it stopped and we got Peter.
Oh, okay.
And then someone else asked, well, where do you think he's got an accent? Where do you think he's from? And it just stopped, England. And it was the same voice. Peter is
Oh,
from
wow.
England. You know what I mean? So that's where you
Right.
kind of take it a little more seriously. But in the back of my head, I'm always thinking too that some bored trucker's parked on the side of the road somewhere with a CB and he's listening to us do this and throwing words. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. So are you broadcasting like those messages? You're just saying those
We're
messages.
saying
This
it, and
device isn't
there's this
broadcasting
theory
them,
that
though.
maybe it's actually picking up on it too and sending it back out. Like we don't know, but
Gotcha.
because you're talking and there's this box and it's got this sort of speaker thing. So we're not 100% like I'm not willing to 100% accept everything that comes out of this spirit box, if that makes sense to
Gotcha.
you, right? Like
So,
it's,
okay, of the equipment that you use, you mentioned also like video cameras and SLR cameras, things like that. What of those are you willing to accept? Like, what evidence do you have that you're like, okay, this is something that is just, I can't explain this. I don't know what this is. And this is what kind of gets me.
a nice clean EVP without the spirit box,
Okay.
like a voice that we pick up giving an intelligent response to a question, that I will accept as something. And then, yeah, if you take a picture of something like with your camera and it picks up on a shape or a shadow that wasn't there, or a video where something's moving, that I'll take a lot more seriously. In fact, when we were filming one of the We Want to Believe episodes at Bailey House, we were in the basement and we had set up a laser grid. So it's basically just what it sounds like. It's this device that shoots out this laser grid pattern across the surface, and anything that disrupts that pattern shows up as a shadow on the wall. So we turned out all the lights in this basement. Laser grid was turned on, and there was the outline. It was like the shape, a shoulder and a head shadow on the wall. But there's nothing there to cause that. We switched the lights on. Nothing. Turn the lights off. It's still there. Lights on. Nope. There's nothing that could really cause that. Turn the lights off. It's still there. And we're videotaping the whole time. It's still there. Then we did that one more time and it was gone. Like it had completely cleared out. And we got that on
Wow.
video. I can't explain it.
So what was going on at that house?
I mean, there's been stories for decades about like people seeing things, hearing voices, doors opening and closing on their own, things moving about, shadows where there shouldn't be shadows, that kind of thing. So that leads me to believe that there was something going on in the basement at Bailey House.
Right.
Like I have no doubt. And we picked up EVPs there, people saying my name, calling, me an effing prick and stuff like that when there was no one there that could have done that. And I actually even had a little toy hammer come off a shelf. And then I put it back up, and I kept stomping my feet to try to make it do that and cause it. And nothing could have caused that little toy hammer to come off the shelf. Like it just did. So
Wow.
that's the most compelling evidence I've seen. But that wasn't on video. You heard the tick, tick, and that was it.
Right.
So it's a personal experience, we call it. So none of those would stand up by scientific scrutiny, but I experienced it. Peter was there to see it as well.
All right. So I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
One day I'm driving home. I used to DJ events. So I was out and about. It's like 2 a.m. or something like that as I'm driving home. And there were 2 roads to get to my house. One was the shorter road. It was a little bit dangerous. Curvy. I never really liked driving that road. And then there was the longer way, lots of stop signs, lots of stoplights. And at 2 or 3 in the morning, like, should I just take that back road? And I never really felt safe about taking the back road. One night, I'm at the stoplight, and I'm like, I'm tired. I'm just going to take the back road and go this route, the short route, the more dangerous route. As I'm sitting at the stoplight, I smelled cigar, like somebody was smoking a cigar. I'm the only one at the stoplight in any of the 4 corners. Now, my grandpa used to smoke cigars, and I always recognize that smell and think about my grandpa. And I was like, that's weird. Why do I smell this? And then I just got this feeling of, don't go this way.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that one?
You know what? Like, it's funny. Like, there's 2 schools of thought. Maybe because you were contemplating doing this thing that could have been dangerous at 2:30 in the morning. Your grandpa came and just let you know that he's there and watching you, and maybe you shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. Or it could be psychological, and in your head, you're doubting it, and then your brain is just sort of tricking you a bit into thinking that maybe you should do something. You know what I mean? Like trying to come up with some memory of something to kind of say, no, this is a bad. You know what I mean? There's 2 sides to that coin that you can explain. And people who are like, I know people who just, they believe 100% they don't need evidence or anything, and they just like, yeah, everything's paranormal and blah blah blah. They would just be like, man, your grandpa was there, and that's what's going on. And
Exactly.
Spirit, blah blah blah. And then there's the other people who are a bit skeptical. They're like, well, your brain, because we don't know how our brains exactly work. Your part of you subconsciously could be like, this is dumb, and I'm going to do something that makes you pause and think about it. Mm-hmm. So it triggers that memory.
Right.
Your grandfather, and you go, oh yeah, oh maybe that's not such a good, you know what I mean? And he's dead, and maybe that's not a good idea, and stuff like that. Yeah. But I mean, I love stories like that. I've had stuff like that happen many times, and it just really does make you pause.
I like the 2 definitions there, because that's exactly where I am on that story. It's like, okay, maybe it was grandpa watching out for me, or maybe it was just my brain tricking me. I don't know. I don't know if that makes me a skeptic exactly, but if we've got skeptics listening to this show, what do you say to them about the paranormal, specifically ghosts?
I think it's good to have a healthy dose of skepticism. We do with every investigation, and even within the investigation, everything that we have happen that we could deem as paranormal, we look at with a skeptical eye. I think blind faith in anything is dangerous. And I think full on skepticism being like, there's nothing, period. This is it. I think that's dangerous too. And life's not as much fun either. With
I agree with
being
you.
too skeptical. But I think it's good to be skeptical. I think it's good. We have people on the team who are skeptics, and I like it because you'll get caught up in something, and they'll be like, "Hang on, guys, but what about this?" Right? And you go, "Yeah, you're right. It could be." You know what I mean? Like it makes you stop and think, because in order for this to be taken seriously, I think that's how you got to look at it. And if you want to get someone, a scientist, to really take a hard look at it, you got to present it with that level of skepticism, and not just come across as some Yahoo, for lack of a better word, that's getting you out there, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I think to the skeptics, I say that's great. Keep being skeptical, but don't let your skepticism also blind you too much either to things, right? Like keep a little bit of an open mind, because I think that's healthy.
So you kind of manage a network of different paranormal television shows, right?
Yeah, I'm a manager of the Paranormal Network, which is a whole YouTube channel dedicated to paranormal content. Basically, like we have the show We Want to Believe broadcasts on there. We have a show called The UFO Show, which highlights all the top UFO news. And let's face it, there's a lot of that going on right now with the full disclosure in about a week's time. Well, by now we'll probably know by the time this actually airs what the government's saying. So we think that's pretty cool. We have another show called That Bigfoot Show, which gets about Bigfoot and all things related to Bigfoot. Another one called Hunting the Haunted, where we take famous cases of paranormal activity, like the Enfield haunting, the Amityville horror, stuff like that. And we pull them apart and try to look at,
Oh, that's
hoax,
cool.
not hoax, that kind of thing. And Peter and I host that. Another show called Mytheries, which is a little about myths and mysteries and that have been with people and dissecting that. So we got all sorts of stuff. And it's on YouTube, the Paranormal Network. It's the one with the black logo with the white PN. Or if you go on Facebook, just type in Paranormal Headquarters, like at Paranormal Headquarters, and it'll come up that way. And it's newly launched. We're having a lot of fun with it. And it's got a lot of, it's all people who want to believe as well and have a real fascination for it. So we try to present it in a entertaining way, but we're not the people that just jump in. Yeah, it's real. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No, that sounds great. I'll definitely, we'll put a link to that in the podcast description. And, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and helping us learn more about ghosts.
That was my pleasure. Thanks so much, Russ.
All right. We will continue learning more next week. Yeah, we have got some amazing topics coming up. I am loving this show. I know I've said that already, but okay, we're going to be talking about narcissism. We're going to be talking about the modern Olympic ruins. We're also going to be talking about, with all of these innovations that we're having as far as like cars and just kind of this changing and shifting environment of our cities, what are our cities going to look like in the future, and what do we need to change now? I love that topic, and we will be talking about that in the coming weeks. We're also going to be talking about resilience, and we're going to be talking with someone about UFOs as well. So if you're into ghosts, you probably might like this whole UFO thing too, and check that out. All right. You've got to subscribe. You've got to listen. And also check out our daily podcast called This Is Today, where you can learn about the national events and the events in history. Thanks for listening to Learning More, and we will talk to you next week.